The smell of dust and failure hung thick in the air as Catherine Kimball stood on the porch of her late father's ranch house, watching vultures circle overhead like they already knew her fate. 23 years old and alone in the Nebraska prairie, with 300 head of cattle, 2 hired hands who had quit that morning, and a stack of unpaid bills thick enough to use as kindling. She had never felt more certain that the men in Scottsbluff were right when they whispered she would lose everything within a month. Her father, Thomas Kimball, had died 3 weeks ago when his horse threw him during a storm, and the aftermath had been a parade of condolences that barely masked the satisfaction in people's eyes. The Kimball Ranch was one of the largest spreads in western Nebraska, sitting pretty along the North Platte River with some of the best grazing land in the territory. More than one neighboring rancher had made offers to buy her out at prices that were insults wrapped in false sympathy. Catherine had turned them all down, which had earned her a reputation for being stubborn and foolish in equal measure. She pressed her palms against the weathered railing and stared out at the land that stretched toward the bluffs in the distance. The year was 1883, and women simply did not run cattle operations of this size. They married men who did, or they sold to men who did, or they watched everything crumble while men waited to pick up the pieces. Those seemed to be the only options the world was willing to offer her. Miss Kimball. The voice came from behind her, and Catherine turned to find Samuel Morton, her father's foreman, standing in the doorway with his hat in his hands. The 40-year-old man had worked for her father for 15 years, and the expression on his weathered face told her everything she needed to know before he opened his mouth. "You are leaving too," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I am sorry, miss. It is not that I do not think you are capable, but the other men are talking. They say working for a woman is not right. My wife, she is concerned about what people will say." He looked down at his boots. "I got a position with the Henderson Ranch starting next week." Catherine nodded slowly. Richard Henderson was one of the men who had offered to buy her out, his smile revealing tobacco-stained teeth as he explained that a delicate thing like her had no business trying to manage livestock and hired hands. The fact that her foreman was going to work for him felt like a betrayal that cut deeper than she wanted to admit. "I understand," she lied. "Thank you for your years of service to my father." After Morton left, Catherine walked back into the house and sank into her father's chair in the study. The leather still smelled like his pipe tobacco, and for a moment she let herself feel the full weight of her grief and fear. Then she straightened her spine and opened the ledger that contained the ranch's accounts. Numbers did not care whether she was a man or a woman. They only cared about facts, and the facts were grim. She needed to get the cattle to market in Omaha within 2 months, or she would not have enough money to pay the mortgage on the land. She needed at least 4 experienced ranch hands to move that many head across the state. She needed someone who knew how to handle the logistics of a cattle drive. She needed a miracle. The knock on the door 3 hours later was so unexpected that Catherine nearly knocked over the oil lamp on the desk. She was not expecting visitors, and her hand instinctively went to the rifle that hung above the fireplace before she reminded herself that answering the door armed might not be the best approach. The man standing on her porch was a stranger, tall and lean with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of the sky before a storm. He wore a dusty brown hat, a blue shirt that had seen better days, and the kind of worn leather chaps that spoke of long hours in the saddle. A horse stood tied to the post nearby, a sturdy roan that looked as trail-worn as its rider. "Can I help you?" Catherine asked, keeping one hand on the doorframe in a posture she hoped looked more confident than she felt. "Name is Isaac Porter, madam. I heard in town that you might be looking for ranch hands." His voice was deep and steady, with a slight drawl that suggested he came from somewhere south of Nebraska. Catherine studied him carefully. He looked to be in his mid-20s, and there was something direct in his gaze that made her think he was not the type to waste time with nonsense. Still, the timing seemed too convenient. Word travels fast. My foreman only quit this morning. Small town, madam. People talk. He shifted his weight slightly. I have been working cattle since I was 14. Spent the last 5 years on drives from Texas to Kansas, and I know the route to Omaha well enough to ride it blindfolded. Why would you want to work for me? I am sure you heard the rest of what people are saying in town. Isaac Porter met her eyes without flinching. I heard plenty. Heard that you are a woman trying to run a ranch alone. Heard that you are going to fail. Heard that you should sell out while you still can. He paused. I also heard that your father was a fair man who paid honest wages and treated his workers with respect. Figure if you are half the person he was, you are worth working for. Something in Catherine's chest loosened slightly, though she kept her expression neutral. I cannot pay much until I get the cattle to market. Room and board and a small wage with a bonus when we sell the herd. That is all I can offer. Sounds fair to me. You should know that every other hand has quit. You would be working for a woman that most of this town expects to fail within a month. Your reputation might suffer. Isaac Porter smiled for the first time, and it transformed his entire face from stern to something warmer. Madam, I have been poor, I have been hungry, and I have been looked down on by plenty of people for plenty of reasons. My reputation will survive. The question is whether you are willing to hire me. Catherine found herself smiling back. When can you start? Right now, if you need me to. Got everything I own in my saddlebags. Then welcome to the Kimball Ranch, Mr. Porter. I hope you do not regret this decision. I have a feeling I would not, Miss Kimball. Over the next 3 days, Isaac Porter proved himself worth every cent Catherine was not yet paying him. He rose before dawn to tend the horses, spent his days riding the fence lines and checking on the cattle, and worked until the last light faded from the sky. More importantly, he treated Catherine like a partner rather than an obstacle to work around. On the 4th morning, he found her in the barn struggling with a saddle that her father had commissioned years ago. The thing was built for a man twice her size, and she was trying to hoist it onto her mare without much success. You need a different saddle, Isaac said from the doorway. Catherine blew a strand of dark hair out of her eyes. This is the best saddle we have. I can manage it. Did not say you could not manage it. Said you need a different saddle. There is a saddler in town who could probably adjust one to fit you better. No shame in using equipment that suits your build. He walked over and lifted the saddle with an ease that made Catherine both grateful and slightly annoyed. You planning to ride out with me today? I am. I need to see the full state of the herd for myself. My father kept good records, but numbers on paper are not the same as seeing them with your own eyes. Isaac nodded approvingly. Smart thinking. Give me 10 minutes to get the horses ready and we can head out. They rode northeast toward where the majority of the cattle were grazing in the grasslands near the river. The morning was cool and clear, the kind of late spring day that made the Nebraska prairie look deceptively gentle. Catherine had grown up on this land and knew better. The weather could turn vicious without warning, and the isolation that seemed peaceful now could become deadly if someone got injured or lost. How long have you been running cattle? Catherine asked as they rode. My father had a small ranch in Texas. Lost it after the war when I was 12. After that, I worked for other people, learned the trade from the ground up. Isaac kept his eyes on the horizon, reading the land with the ease of long practice. You grow up here, born in the house you are sleeping under. My mother died when I was 7, so it was just my father and me after that. He taught me everything he knew about running the ranch, but I think he always assumed he would have more time. Catherine's voice caught slightly. He was only 52. I am sorry for your loss. Losing a parent is hard no matter the age. They rode in companionable silence for a while before Isaac spoke again. Can I ask you something personal, Miss Kimball? You can ask. I might not answer. Why not just sell? You could get enough money to live comfortably somewhere else. Maybe start over doing something easier. Catherine had been asked this question a dozen times in the past 3 weeks, but something about the way Isaac asked it made her think he genuinely wanted to understand rather than convince her to give up. This land is all I have left of my parents. My mother is buried in the plot behind the house. My father built this ranch from nothing, and he trusted me to care for it after he was gone. If I sell now, everything he worked for disappears. The Henderson Ranch absorbs our land, and the Kimball name becomes a footnote. She gestured at the rolling grassland around them. Besides, I am good at this. I know cattle, I know this land, and I know how to run an operation. The only thing I lack is what you cannot earn or learn, and that is being born male. Isaac glanced at her with something that might have been respect. Then I guess we better prove everyone wrong. They spent the day riding the range, and Catherine was relieved to find that the cattle were in better shape than she feared. The spring grass had been good, and most of the cows had healthy calves at their sides. She made notes in the small leather journal she carried, counting heads and identifying which steers were ready for market. We have about 280 head worth selling, she said as they paused to water the horses at a creek. That is less than I hoped, but more than I feared. Isaac nodded. Good-sized herd for a drive. We will need at least 3 more experienced hands plus a cook and a remuda of horses. Can we manage it with 3? Money is tight. We could try with 2, but it would be hard on everyone. Moving cattle is not like herding sheep. They spook easy, and if something goes wrong, you need enough people to control them. He looked at her seriously. I know you are trying to save money, but cutting corners on a cattle drive is a good way to lose the whole herd. Catherine knew he was right, but the numbers in her ledger haunted her. Where am I supposed to find 3 experienced hands willing to work for a woman? Leave that to me. I know some people who might be interested. True to his word, Isaac rode into Scottsbluff the next day and returned with 2 men. The first was a grizzled cowboy named James Fletcher, who looked to be in his 50s, and had the kind of weathered face that spoke of decades spent outdoors. The second was younger, maybe 19 or 20, with red hair and an eager expression. Isaac introduced him as Thomas Wright. James worked with me on 2 drives up from Texas, Isaac explained as they stood in the ranch yard. He knows cattle and he knows the trail. Thomas is greener, but he is a hard worker and he learns fast. Catherine shook hands with both men, trying to project more confidence than she felt. You both understand the situation. You would be working for me, and there are people in town who will give you grief about it. James Fletcher shrugged. Madam, I have worked for saints and I have worked for bastards. Long as you pay fair wages and do not ask me to do anything illegal or immoral, I do not much care what the gossips say. Thomas Wright nodded enthusiastically. My mother raised 4 boys on her own after my father died. If she could do that, I figure you can run a ranch. Catherine felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Thank you, both of you. We will start planning the drive tomorrow. That evening, Catherine cooked dinner for the 4 of them in the ranch house kitchen. It felt strange to have people at the table again after weeks of eating alone, but it was a good kind of strange. The men talked about past cattle drives and shared stories that ranged from harrowing to hilarious, and Catherine found herself laughing for the first time since her father died. So there we were, James was saying, hip deep in a river with 200 head of cattle deciding they did not want to cross after all, and Isaac here just rides straight into the middle of them, calm as you please. Isaac shook his head. The trick is not letting them know you are scared, even when you are terrified. Were you terrified? Catherine asked. Absolutely. Cattle in water are unpredictable and I cannot swim worth a damn. He grinned at her startled expression. But they did not need to know that. After dinner, Isaac stayed to help Catherine clean up while the other men headed to the bunkhouse. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, washing and drying dishes, before Catherine spoke. Thank you for finding James and Thomas. I know they are here because they trust you. They are here because they need work and you are offering fair wages. But yes, I vouched for you. Isaac dried the last plate and set it on the shelf. You should know that Richard Henderson approached me in town. Catherine's hand stilled in the wash water. What did he say? Offered me twice what you are paying to come work for him. Said I was wasting my time with a doomed venture. Isaac's expression was hard to read in the lamplight. Told him I was not interested. Why? The question slipped out before Catherine could stop it. Isaac was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. Couple of reasons. First, I do not like men who profit from other people's misfortune. Henderson wants your land and he is willing to sabotage you to get it. That does not sit right with me. He paused. Second, I meant what I said when I showed up here. You deserve a fair chance to prove yourself. Everyone does. And if I fail anyway, then at least you will have failed honestly with people beside you who tried their best. Isaac met her eyes. But I do not think you are going to fail, Miss Kimball. You are too stubborn for that. Catherine laughed despite herself. Is that a compliment? In my experience, stubborn is what keeps people alive out here. So yes, it is a compliment. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. They gathered the horses that would make up the remuda, ensuring each rider would have multiple mounts to rotate through during the long drive. Catherine used most of her remaining cash to buy supplies. Flour, coffee, salt pork, beans, and all the other staples they would need for the journey. Isaac found them a cook, an older man named Henry who had a wooden leg and a talent for making edible meals out of limited ingredients. Catherine spent her evenings poring over maps and planning their route. Omaha was roughly 400 miles east, and they would need to average about 12 miles a day to make it in time for the market. The route would take them through open prairie, across rivers, and past several small towns where they could resupply if needed. You ever been on a cattle drive before? Isaac asked one evening as they studied the maps together in the ranch house. No, my father went on several, but he always left me in charge of the home operation. Catherine traced the route with her finger. I know the theory, but theory and practice are different things. They are, Isaac agreed, but you learn fast and you are not afraid of hard work. That counts for a lot. He pointed to a spot on the map. This river here is going to be tricky. It is wide and the current can be strong this time of year. We will need to scout the best crossing point carefully. What happens if we cannot cross? Then we go north or south until we find a better spot, which costs us time. Or we wait for the water to drop, which also costs us time. Isaac leaned back in his chair. Cattle drives are about problem solving on the move. You make the best decisions you can with the information you have, and you adapt when things go wrong. You sound like my father. He used to say that planning was important, but flexibility was essential. Smart man. They set out on the 1st of June, pushing the cattle east under a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. Catherine rode near the front of the herd alongside Isaac, while James and Thomas worked the flanks and Henry brought up the rear with the chuck wagon. The first day was chaotic, with the cattle unused to being pushed, and several steers making breaks for freedom that required quick riding to contain. By the second day, the herd had settled into a rhythm, and Catherine began to understand the flow of the drive. It was exhausting work that required constant attention, but there was something deeply satisfying about it too. She was doing the thing everyone said she could not do, and with each mile they covered, she felt a little more certain that she might actually succeed. On the third evening, as they made camp beside a small creek, Isaac rode up beside her and gestured to the herd settling down for the night. "You did good today. The cattle are moving well and we are making decent time." Catherine felt a flush of pleasure at the praise. "I had good teachers." "Maybe, but you have good instincts too. That steer that tried to bolt this morning, you read what he was going to do before he did it. That is not something you can teach someone." They sat together watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and orange. Catherine was aware of Isaac beside her in a way that felt new and slightly unsettling. Over the past few weeks, she had come to rely on his judgment and appreciate his steady presence, but somewhere along the way, her feelings had shifted into something more complicated. She was attracted to him. That much was undeniable. But more than that, she respected him. He treated her like an equal, challenged her when he thought she was wrong, and supported her decisions even when he might have done things differently. In a world that constantly told her she was not good enough, Isaac Porter made her feel capable and strong. "Can I ask you something?" Catherine said. "Sure." "Why did you really come to the ranch that day? The truth, not the polite version." Isaac was quiet for a long moment. "The truth is I was tired. Tired of working for men who treated their hands like disposable tools. Tired of watching people get pushed around because they did not fit into neat little boxes. When I heard what was happening to you, I thought maybe I could be part of something different. Something better." He glanced at her. "Does that sound foolish?" "No, it sounds honest." Catherine hesitated, then added, "I am glad you came. Me too." The days blended together into a pattern of early mornings and late evenings, of dust and sun and the constant movement of cattle. They crossed the first major river without incident, though Catherine's heart was in her throat the entire time as she watched the cattle plunge into the water. Isaac rode beside her, calling out encouragement and advice, and when the last steer climbed up the far bank, she felt like they had won a significant victory. Towns were few and far between, but when they reached them, Catherine was always aware of the stares and whispers. A woman leading a cattle drive was unusual enough to draw attention, and not all of it was friendly. In one small settlement, the owner of the general store tried to overcharge her for supplies until Isaac stepped in with a cold smile and a suggestion that they take their business elsewhere. "You do not have to fight my battles for me," Catherine said after they left the store with fairly priced goods. "I was not fighting your battle. I was fighting our battle. That man was trying to cheat us, and I do not stand for that regardless of who is in charge." Isaac loaded the supplies into the wagon. "Besides, you were about to fight it yourself. I just saved time." Catherine smiled despite herself. "How did you know?" "I have spent enough time around you to recognize that look in your eye. Same one you get right before you do something everyone says is impossible." 2 weeks into the drive, a storm rolled in from the west with a speed that caught them off guard. One moment the sky was clear, and the next it was black with clouds that flickered with lightning. The cattle began to get nervous, lowing and shifting restlessly, and Catherine felt her own anxiety spike. "Everyone get ready," Isaac shouted over the rising wind. "If they stampede, do not try to stop them. Just try to turn them in a circle until they calm down." The storm hit like a physical force, with rain so heavy Catherine could barely see 10 feet in front of her. Thunder cracked overhead, and the cattle bolted. She urged her horse forward, following the dark mass of running animals more by instinct than sight. Lightning illuminated the chaos in brief, terrifying flashes, and she caught glimpses of Isaac and the others working to turn the herd. It felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes before the cattle began to slow, their panic exhausted. The rain continued to fall in sheets, and Catherine was soaked to the skin and shivering. She could hear Isaac calling out, checking that everyone was accounted for, and she added her own voice to the count. When dawn finally came, gray and watery, they took stock of the damage. One of the horses had pulled up lame, several cattle were missing, and Thomas had a nasty gash on his arm from where a broken branch had caught him. But everyone was alive, and most of the herd was intact. "Could have been worse," James said philosophically as Henry bandaged Thomas's arm. "Could have been better," Thomas muttered, but he was grinning despite the pain. Isaac found Catherine checking on her mare and examining a cut on the horse's flank. "You all right?" he asked. "I am fine. My horse took a small scrape, but it is not serious." Catherine looked up at him and saw concern in his eyes. "What about you?" "I have been through worse." But his hands were gentle as he helped her clean and bandage the cut on the mare's leg. "You did well last night, kept your head when things went bad." "I was terrified." "So was I." "But you did not let it stop you." Isaac straightened and met her eyes. "There is something you should know, Catherine." It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it made her breath catch. "What is it?" "I have been thinking about this for a while, trying to find the right time to say it. But I am not sure there is a right time, so I am just going to say it." He took a breath. "You are the bravest person I have ever met. The way you have handled everything that has been thrown at you, the way you keep going even when everyone expects you to quit, it is extraordinary. And somewhere along the way, I stopped just admiring you and started falling for you." Catherine stared at him, her heart hammering in her chest. "Isaac, you do not have to say anything right now. I know your focus is on getting the herd to market, and I would never do anything to jeopardize that. But I wanted you to know how I feel. When this drive is over and the ranch is secure, I would like the chance to court you properly. If you are interested." "I am," Catherine said, the words tumbling out. "Interested, I mean. I have been feeling the same way but did not know if you. I thought maybe it was just me." Isaac's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen from him. "Not just you, definitely not just you." They stood there in the gray morning light, soaked and exhausted and grinning at each other like fools, until James called out that breakfast was ready and broke the moment. But as they walked back to camp together, Isaac's hand brushed against Catherine's, and she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun finally breaking through the clouds. The rest of the drive took on a different quality after that. The work was still hard and the days were still long, but Catherine found herself looking forward to the evenings when she and Isaac would sit together and talk. They shared stories about their childhoods, their dreams for the future, and the thousand small details that people in love want to know about each other. "What made you decide to stay in Nebraska?" Isaac asked one night as they kept watch over the sleeping herd. "You could have gone anywhere after your father died. This is my home. I know every creek and hill on that ranch. I know which pastures have the best grass and where the cattle like to shelter from the wind. Leaving would have felt like abandoning part of myself." Catherine looked up at the stars scattered across the black sky. "What about you? Where is home for you?" "Honestly, I have not had a place I really considered home since my father lost the ranch. I have just been moving from job to job, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots." Isaac's voice was quiet. "But lately I have been thinking that home might be less about a place and more about the people you are with." Catherine reached out and took his hand. "I would like you to stay, After the drive, I mean. If the ranch survives this, I am going to need a good foreman. Someone I can trust to help me build something lasting. I cannot think of anything I would rather do. Isaac squeezed her hand gently. We will make it work, Catherine. Together. They reached the outskirts of Omaha in mid-July, dusty and trail-worn but triumphant. The cattle had held up well during the journey, and Catherine's count showed they had only lost about 15 head to various mishaps. It was a better success rate than she had dared to hope for. The stockyards were a chaos of noise and smell, with multiple herds being sorted and sold. Catherine handled the negotiations herself, refusing to let the buyers dismiss her as someone they could cheat. Isaac stood beside her, silent but supportive, and his presence gave her confidence. When the final tally was complete, Catherine found herself holding a bank draft for more money than she had ever seen in her life. It was enough to pay off the mortgage, cover the supplies and wages she owed, and still have a comfortable cushion left over. She felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back quickly. You did it, Isaac said softly. They said you could not, and you proved them all wrong. We did it, Catherine corrected. I could never have managed this without you, without any of you. That evening, she took the crew to a restaurant in Omaha and bought them the best meal they had eaten in weeks. James told elaborate stories that made everyone laugh. Thomas ate enough for 3 people, and Henry complained good-naturedly about the quality of the cooking. Isaac sat beside Catherine, his shoulder touching hers, and the warmth of his presence made everything feel possible. They started the journey back to Scottsbluff the next day, riding without the pressure of managing a herd. It felt almost like a holiday after the intensity of the drive. Catherine found herself relaxing in ways she had not been able to for months, and she caught Isaac watching her with an expression that made her heart skip. On their last night before reaching home, Isaac asked her to take a walk with him away from the camp. They wandered through the prairie grass until they found a small rise that looked out over the darkening landscape. Catherine, Isaac said, taking both of her hands in his. I know we have not known each other very long, just 2 months, which is nothing in the grand scheme of things. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life than I am about my feelings for you. I feel the same way, Catherine said, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling in her chest. I do not have much to offer you. No land, no family fortune, just a good horse and the skills I have learned. But if you will have me, I promise to stand beside you for as long as you will let me. I will help you build that ranch into something your father would be proud of. I will support you when people doubt you, and I will challenge you when I think you are wrong. I will love you with everything I have. Isaac, are you asking me to marry you? He smiled, and in that smile Catherine saw her entire future. I am. What do you say? I say yes. Absolutely yes. Isaac pulled her close and kissed her, and Catherine felt like every difficult moment of the past few months had led her exactly where she was meant to be. When they finally broke apart, both of them were grinning like idiots. We should probably tell the others, Catherine said. We should. But maybe we can have a few more minutes of this first. They arrived back at the Kimball ranch on a bright morning in late July. The house looked exactly as they had left it, but Catherine saw it with new eyes. This was not just the place she was trying desperately to hold onto anymore. It was the foundation for the life she and Isaac were going to build together. The first thing she did was ride into Scottsbluff to pay off the mortgage at the bank. The clerk's expression when she handed over the full amount was worth every difficult mile of the drive. Word spread quickly through town that Catherine Kimball had not only succeeded but had thrived, and the narrative began to shift. She was no longer the foolish girl trying to do something impossible. She was the woman who had done it. Richard Henderson stopped by the ranch a week later, ostensibly to congratulate her, but really to see if she might be interested in selling now that she had proven herself. Catherine invited him into the parlor and served him coffee with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Henderson, but the ranch is not for sale. Not now and not in the foreseeable future. Even if I offered you significantly more than market value, even then, this land is my home, and I intend to keep building on what my father started." Catherine set down her coffee cup. "I also intend to marry Isaac Porter in the fall, so the ranch will be a family operation again soon." Henderson's expression soured. "Porter, he is the one who turned down my job offer to work for you. He is. And he is a better man than you gave him credit for." Catherine stood, making it clear the conversation was over. "Thank you for stopping by, Mr. Henderson. I'm sure you can see yourself out." After he left, Isaac came in from the barn where he had been tactfully staying out of sight. "How did it go?" "About as well as expected." "He is not happy, but he knows there is nothing he can do." Catherine walked over to Isaac and wrapped her arms around him. "I told him we are getting married in the fall. I hope that is all right. I know we have not set a date yet." "Fall sounds perfect." Isaac kissed the top of her head. "Just enough time to build that addition onto the house we talked about. A place that is ours, not just your father's." They were married on the first Saturday in October, in the same small church where Catherine's parents had been wed 30 years earlier. The ceremony was simple, with James standing as best man and Henry giving Catherine away since her father was not there to do it. Thomas played the fiddle, a talent no one had known he possessed until he offered. Catherine wore a dress of pale blue silk that she had ordered from Omaha, and Isaac wore a new suit that made him look uncomfortable but devastatingly handsome. When the preacher asked if they would love and honor each other for as long as they both lived, their voices rang out with such certainty that several people in the congregation got misty-eyed. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed half the county. People came from miles around, some out of genuine affection and others out of curiosity. Catherine did not care about their reasons. She danced with her new husband under the stars, surrounded by friends and well-wishers, and felt happier than she had thought possible. "I love you, Mrs. Porter," Isaac whispered as they swayed to the music. "I love you too, though I think I will keep using Kimball for the ranch business." "Porter Kimball has a nice ring to it, do not you think?" "I think anything sounds good if you are saying it." The first year of their marriage was a period of adjustment and growth. They worked side by side to improve the ranch, adding new breeding stock and improving the grazing rotation. Isaac proved to be not just a capable foreman but a genuine partner who understood the business as well as Catherine did. They made decisions together, sometimes arguing passionately about the best course of action, but always respecting each other's perspectives. James and Thomas stayed on as permanent hands, and Henry continued cooking for the crew. The bunkhouse became a place of laughter and camaraderie, and Catherine often found herself grateful for the small family they had built together. In the spring of their second year together, Catherine realized she was pregnant. She told Isaac one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, and the expression on his face was something she would remember for the rest of her life. "You are certain?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. "As certain as I can be. The baby should come in early autumn." Isaac pulled her close, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to be parents, we are. Are you ready for that?" "I have no idea what I am doing, but I have never been more ready for anything." He kissed her softly. "How are you feeling about it?" "Terrified and excited in equal measure. I keep thinking about my mother and wishing she were here to give me advice." Catherine leaned against Isaac's shoulder. "But mostly I am happy. This feels right." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Catherine continued working on the ranch until Isaac and the rest of the crew staged what amounted to a gentle intervention and insisted she take it easier. She chafed at the restriction but had to admit that she was more tired than usual, and her changing body made some tasks more difficult. Their son was born on a cool September evening, arriving quickly and with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world. Catherine held him in her arms and looked down at his tiny, perfect face, feeling a surge of love so intense it almost hurt. "He is beautiful," Isaac said, his voice choked with emotion. "He looks like you. He has your eyes," Catherine countered. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at their son, Catherine knew exactly what felt right. "Thomas," she said. "After my father, Thomas Isaac Porter." Isaac smiled through his tears. "Perfect." Young Tommy, as they called him, thrived. He was a curious, energetic baby who seemed to take in everything around him with serious gray eyes. Catherine marveled at how deeply she could love someone she had only just met, and watching Isaac with their son made her fall in love with her husband all over again. The ranch continued to prosper. Word had spread about the success of their first cattle drive, and other ranchers began to treat Catherine with a respect that had been absent before. She proved herself again and again, making smart decisions that grew their operation while managing the challenges that came with ranching in Nebraska. When Tommy was 2 years old, Catherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was harder, with morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon and exhaustion that made her feel like she was moving through water. But when their daughter arrived the following spring, pink-cheeked and perfect, Catherine decided every difficult moment had been worth it. They named her Rose after Catherine's mother, and she proved to be as different from her brother as night from day. Where Tommy was energetic and bold, Rose was thoughtful and observant. She watched the world with dark eyes that missed nothing, and by the time she could walk, she was following her father around the ranch like a tiny shadow. Years passed in a rhythm of seasons and cycles. The ranch grew from a struggling operation into one of the most successful spreads in western Nebraska. Catherine and Isaac added more land, improved their breeding program, and became known for producing quality cattle and horses. They were respected not just for their business acumen, but for the fair way they treated their employees and their willingness to help neighbors in need. Tommy grew into a serious boy who loved the ranch with the same passion his mother did. By the time he was 8, he was already helping with real chores rather than just play acting, and he had a natural talent with horses that made Isaac proud. Rose was quieter but no less capable. She had a gift for numbers and could calculate complex figures in her head faster than most adults could manage with pencil and paper. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac surprised Catherine with a trip to Omaha. They left the children in the capable hands of James and Henry, who had both become beloved uncles in all but name, and took the train east for a week of luxury they rarely allowed themselves. "I cannot remember the last time we did something just for us," Catherine said as they checked into a hotel that was far fancier than anywhere she had ever stayed. "Too long," Isaac agreed. "I love the ranch and I love our children, but I wanted some time with just my wife. To remind you that I still think you are extraordinary." They spent the week exploring the city, eating at fine restaurants and attending the theater. On their last evening, they walked along the Missouri River as the sun set, hand in hand like they had been all those years ago on the cattle drive. "Do you ever regret it?" Catherine asked. "You could have had an easier life working for someone else. Instead, you tied yourself to a woman the whole town expected to fail." Isaac stopped walking and turned to face her. "Catherine, you gave me everything I never knew I wanted. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just getting by. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made, and I have never regretted it for a single moment. Even when I am stubborn and refuse to listen to your very sensible advice, especially then. Your stubbornness is one of my favorite things about you." He kissed her softly. "We have built something amazing together, not just the ranch but our life, our children, everything, and I would choose you 1,000 times over." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you. More now than I did when we married, which I would not have thought possible back then. I know what you mean. Every year I find new reasons to love you." They returned home to find the ranch running smoothly, and their children excited to share everything that had happened while they were gone. Tommy had helped deliver a foal, which he described in breathless detail. Rose had created a new system for organizing the ranch's financial records, which she explained with the kind of pride usually reserved for much larger accomplishments. "Our children are going to be incredible adults," Isaac said that night as they lay in bed. "They already are incredible. We are very lucky and blessed. Though I think we made our own luck too. You showed them what it means to be brave and to fight for what you believe in." More years passed, and the Kimball Porter Ranch became an institution in Scottsbluff. When Tommy was 15 and Rose was 13, they hired their first female ranch hand, a young woman named Sarah, who reminded Catherine so much of herself at that age it was almost eerie. Some of the older ranchers grumbled, but most accepted it because the Porters had earned enough respect that their decisions carried weight. Catherine made sure to mentor Sarah the way Isaac had once mentored her, and watching the young woman grow in confidence and skill felt like coming full circle. She thought often about that day when she had stood on the porch convinced she was going to lose everything. She had been so afraid and so alone, not knowing that the best parts of her life were just about to begin. On a warm summer evening when Catherine was 45 and Isaac was 47, they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the bluffs in shades of orange and gold. Tommy was out checking the fence lines, Rose was inside helping with dinner preparations, and for a moment it was just the two of them like it had been so many times before. "Remember the day we met?" Catherine asked. "Every detail. You looked exhausted and determined and absolutely beautiful. I thought you were going to tell me to leave, but instead you gave me a chance. Best decision I ever made." Catherine leaned against Isaac's shoulder. "You know what I think about sometimes? All the people who said I could not do it. Run the ranch alone, make the cattle drive, build a successful operation. They were so certain I would fail. And you proved every single one of them wrong. We proved them wrong. I never did it alone, Isaac. From the moment you knocked on my door and said you would stand beside me, I have had a partner. That made all the difference." Isaac wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "They said a woman could not run a ranch alone, but you were never alone, not after I found you." Catherine smiled and took his hand, marveling at how right it still felt after all these years. "No, I was never alone, and I never want to be." They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. Inside the house, they could hear Rose laughing at something Tommy said, and the sounds of their family preparing dinner drifted out through the open windows. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and thriving, built on the foundation of two people who had believed in each other when no one else would. Catherine thought about the girl she had been, standing on this same porch convinced her world was ending. She wished she could go back and tell that girl that everything was going to work out better than she could possibly imagine. That the stranger who would arrive the next day would become her partner, her love, and the father of her children. That together they would build something lasting and beautiful. But maybe that girl would not have believed it. Maybe some things could only be understood by living them. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked. "How grateful I am. For you, for our children, for this life we built together. For that day you showed up and decided to take a chance on a woman everyone said was going to fail. I took a chance on extraordinary, and it paid off better than I ever dreamed." Isaac kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for saying yes all those years ago, both times. When I asked to work here and when I asked you to marry me. Thank you for asking, for standing beside me when everyone else walked away." They stayed on the porch until Rose called them in for dinner. And then they walked inside together, hand in hand, ready to share another meal with their family. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly under the stars, and the Kimball Porter Ranch stood strong, a testament to what was possible when two people faced the world together. The years continued to unfold with the kind of contentment that comes from a life well lived. Tommy grew into a tall, capable young man who had inherited his mother's determination and his father's steady wisdom. At 20, he took over much of the daily operations of the ranch, working alongside his parents but bringing new ideas and energy to the enterprise. He courted and married a schoolteacher from town, a bright woman named Elizabeth, who won Catherine's heart immediately with her quick wit and genuine kindness. Rose pursued education with a passion that surprised no one who knew her. She attended college in Omaha, becoming one of the few women of her generation to earn a degree in business. When she returned to Scottsbluff, she brought with her modern accounting methods and fresh perspectives on ranch management that helped the family operation grow even more. At 23, she married a veterinarian who had recently opened a practice in town, and their combined expertise in animal husbandry and medicine made them valuable partners to ranchers throughout the region. Catherine and Isaac gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations, though neither of them could fully retire. The ranch was too much a part of who they were. Instead, they became advisors and grandparents, watching with pride as their children carried on the legacy they had built. When Catherine turned 52, the same age her father had been when he died, she stood on the porch one morning feeling the weight of that coincidence. Isaac found her there, as he always seemed to know when she needed him. "You are thinking about your father," he said. "How did you know?" "Because I know you, and because I have been thinking about him too." Isaac stood beside her, their shoulders touching in the comfortable way of people who had spent decades together. "He would be so proud of what you have accomplished, what we have accomplished." "I hope so." "I tried to honor his memory by building something lasting." "You did more than that. You created something even bigger than what he started. The ranch is successful, your children are thriving, and you have changed minds about what women can do out here." Isaac took her hand. "That is a legacy worth celebrating." Catherine squeezed his fingers, feeling the strength that was still there even as time had added silver to his dark hair and lines around his eyes. "I could not have done any of it without you. We have been a good team, the best team." Their grandchildren began arriving over the next few years. Tommy and Elizabeth had 3 children in quick succession, 2 daughters and a son who filled the ranch house with noise and laughter. Rose and her husband had twins, a boy and a girl, who were as different from each other as Rose and Tommy had been. Catherine delighted in being a grandmother, finding joy in teaching the children to ride and helping them learn about the land and the animals. One afternoon when she was 58, Catherine was sitting on the porch with her eldest granddaughter, a serious 6-year-old named Clara, who had asked to hear the story of how the ranch almost got lost. "So there I was," Catherine said, "thinking I was going to lose everything. All the ranch hands had quit, I had no money, and everyone in town was just waiting for me to fail. But then Grandpa Isaac came, Clara said, her eyes wide. Then Grandpa Isaac came. He knocked on that door right there and said he wanted to work for me, even though everyone told him it was a bad idea. Why did he do it? Catherine looked out at the ranch stretching before them, at the cattle grazing peacefully, and the barn that had been rebuilt twice in the intervening years. Because he saw something in me that other people missed. He believed I could do it when I was not sure I believed in myself. That is romantic, Clara said with the gravity only a 6-year-old could muster. Catherine laughed. It was. It still is. Your grandfather is the best man I have ever known. Tell me about the cattle drive. So Catherine told the story again, about the storm and the river crossing, and the moment she realized she was going to succeed. She told it with the same passion she always did, because it was the foundation story of her life. The moment when everything changed. When she stopped being a woman trying to do something impossible and became a woman who was actually doing it. Isaac joined them halfway through, settling into the chair beside Catherine with a contented sigh. Are you telling our adventure story again? Clara asked. It is a good story. Has she gotten to the part where I said something romantic yet? We are getting there. They sat together in the afternoon sun, telling their story to the next generation, and Catherine felt a profound sense of peace. This was what success looked like. Not just the prosperous ranch or the respect of the community, but the family they had built and the love that had sustained them through decades. When Catherine was 63, she received a letter from a young woman in Wyoming who had heard her story. The woman was trying to hold onto her family's ranch after her husband died, and she wanted advice. Catherine spent an entire evening crafting her response, pouring into it all the wisdom and encouragement she wished someone had given her all those years ago. It was the first of many such letters, and answering them became a regular part of Catherine's life. You are becoming famous, Isaac teased one evening as she worked on a particularly long response. I am becoming a cautionary tale, Catherine corrected, or maybe an inspiration. I am not sure which. Both, probably. You showed that it was possible, and that matters to people who are facing similar challenges. I just want them to know they do not have to do it alone, that asking for help and accepting support is not weakness. Coming from you, that message carries weight. Isaac leaned over to read what she had written. That is beautiful. You should publish some of these. Who would want to read an old woman's letters? I would. Our grandchildren would, and I think a lot of other people would too. Catherine considered it and eventually agreed. With Rose's help, she compiled her letters into a small book that was published by a press in Omaha. To her surprise, it sold well, and she began receiving letters from even more women who had been inspired by her story. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the town of Scottsbluff threw them a celebration at the community hall. It was packed with friends, family, and people who had known them over the years. There were speeches about their contributions to the community, about how they had changed perceptions and built something lasting. But Catherine's favorite moment came late in the evening when Isaac pulled her onto the dance floor. The band played a slow waltz and they moved together with the ease of 3 decades of practice. 30 years, Catherine said softly. Where did the time go? Into building something beautiful. Isaac smiled at her, and she saw the young cowboy who had knocked on her door all those years ago. I love you as much now as I did then. More, actually. I did not know it was possible to love someone this much. I feel the same way. You are still my favorite person, Isaac Porter, and you are still the most extraordinary woman I have ever met, Catherine Kimball Porter. They danced until the music ended and then kept dancing anyway, lost in their own world while their family and friends watched with affection. The years that followed were gentler. Catherine and Isaac spent more time traveling, visiting their children and grandchildren, and enjoying the freedom that came with having capable people running the ranch. They took a trip to Texas to see the land where Isaac had grown up, and though the ranch was long gone, he showed Catherine the places he remembered from his childhood. They returned to Omaha regularly, revisiting the city where they had celebrated their 10th anniversary and where Catherine had first sold her cattle all those years ago. It had changed dramatically, growing into a real city, but some things remained familiar. On Catherine's 70th birthday, their entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled every room, and the noise and chaos reminded Catherine of the reception after her wedding. Isaac had organized everything, working with their children to create a surprise party that left Catherine speechless. "You did this for me," she asked as she looked around at the decorations and the people she loved most. "You deserve it. You deserve everything." Isaac kissed her cheek. "Happy birthday, my love." That evening, after the party wound down and most of the family had returned to their own homes, Catherine and Isaac sat together on the porch. It had become their ritual over the years, this quiet time together watching the sun set over the land they loved. "I have been thinking about the future," Catherine said. "What about it? The ranch is in good hands with Tommy and Rose. They have built on what we created and made it even better. Our grandchildren are growing up strong and capable. We have done what we set out to do." "We have," Isaac agreed. "Are you saying you are ready to truly retire?" "Not retire exactly, but maybe acknowledge that this chapter is complete, that we can rest now, knowing we succeeded." Catherine looked at Isaac, seeing the lines and silver hair but also seeing the man who had believed in her when no one else would. "I want to spend more time with you doing things that are just for us. We have earned that." "What did you have in mind?" "I do not know yet. Travel maybe. Finally plant that rose garden I have been talking about for 20 years. Write more letters. Spend time with our grandchildren." Catherine smiled. "Grow old with you without worrying about every detail of ranch management." "That sounds perfect." They made it official the following month, formally turning over the operation of the ranch to Tommy and Rose. There was a ceremony of sorts, with documents signed and responsibilities transferred, but the real moment came when Catherine handed her son the ledger that her father had kept and that she had maintained for decades. "This is yours now," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Take care of it. Take care of the land and the animals and the people who work here." Tommy took the ledger with reverence. "I will, Mama, I promise. You and Papa built something incredible and we will honor that." "I know you will. I am proud of you, of both of you," she added, looking at Rose. "You taught us well," Rose said, hugging her mother tightly. "Everything we know came from watching you two work together and build this life." Catherine and Isaac moved into a smaller house on the edge of the ranch property, a place that was big enough for them and the occasional visiting grandchild, but did not require the upkeep of the main house. They filled it with comfortable furniture, books, and memories collected over a lifetime. Their days took on a new rhythm. They woke when they wanted rather than when the animals demanded it. They spent long mornings over coffee, talking about everything and nothing. They worked on the rose garden Catherine had always wanted, and Isaac turned out to have an unexpected talent for coaxing beautiful blooms from the Nebraska soil. In the afternoons, they often walked down to the main house to visit with family or rode out across the ranch to see how things were progressing. But they were observers now rather than managers, and there was a freedom in that Catherine had not anticipated. "You miss it?" Isaac asked one day as they watched Tommy and his son work with a young horse in the corral. "Sometimes. but mostly I am grateful for what we had and happy to see it continue." Catherine leaned against the fence. "Do you miss it, the work?" "Not as much as I thought I would. I miss being useful sometimes, but then I remember that we already did our part. We built the foundation. Now it is their turn to build on it." One of their greatest joys in these later years was watching their grandchildren grow and begin to make their own marks on the world. Clara, the granddaughter who had asked to hear their story, showed an interest in journalism and began writing articles about ranch life for regional newspapers. Another grandchild decided to become a teacher, inspired by their grandmother's book of letters. When Catherine was 76, she was invited to speak at a women's conference in Omaha. She initially declined, feeling too old and out of touch, but Isaac convinced her to reconsider. "You have important things to say. Your story matters to people." So Catherine went, with Isaac beside her for support, and stood before a room of women ranging from young girls to grandmothers. She told her story, not minimizing the difficulty or the fear, but emphasizing the importance of believing in yourself and finding people who believed in you too. "When everyone said I could not do it," she concluded, "I had one person who said he would stand beside me. That made all the difference. So my advice to you is this: be brave enough to try and smart enough to accept help when it is offered. You do not have to do everything alone." The standing ovation she received brought tears to her eyes, and afterward, dozens of women came up to thank her and share their own stories. Isaac waited patiently, pride evident in his expression, and when they finally left, he took her hand. "You were magnificent. I just told the truth." The truth is magnificent. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner at home, just the two of them. Their children had offered to throw a party, but Catherine and Isaac had declined, preferring something more intimate. 40 years, Catherine said, raising her glass of wine. "That is a long time to put up with someone." "Funny, I was about to say the same thing." Isaac clinked his glass against hers. "Here is to 40 more. I do not think we should make promises we cannot keep. But however much time we have left, I want to spend it with you. That is the best promise of all." They sat together holding hands across the table, the same way they had held hands on countless evenings throughout their marriage. The connection between them had only deepened over time, weathering challenges and changes with a resilience that came from genuine partnership. As they aged into their late 70s and early 80s, their world gradually became smaller, but no less rich. They spent most of their time at home, tending their garden and entertaining the parade of grandchildren and great-grandchildren who came to visit. Their children checked on them regularly, and the whole family gathered for holidays and special occasions. Isaac's health began to decline when he was 83. It was nothing dramatic, just the slow accumulation of years and hard work taking their toll. He tired more easily and his joints ached, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Catherine never wavered. One evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, a ritual they had maintained for nearly 50 years of marriage, Isaac took Catherine's hand. "I have had a good life," he said quietly. "You are not allowed to talk like it is over. We still have time." "I know. But I want you to know, just in case. I have had a good life because of you. You gave me purpose and love and a family I never dreamed I could have. If I died tomorrow, I would die happy." Catherine felt tears slide down her cheeks. "Do not talk about dying. I am not ready to lose you. I am not planning on going anywhere just yet, but when the time comes, I need you to remember something." Isaac turned to face her fully, his eyes still that same stormy gray she had fallen in love with decades ago. "You are the strongest person I have ever known. You survived before you met me, and you will survive after I am gone. But you do not have to be alone. Lean on our children, on our grandchildren, on the community we built together. Isaac, promise me you will keep living, really living, not just going through the motions. You taught me how to do that all those years ago, and I need to know you will do the same for yourself. Catherine nodded, unable to speak through her tears. Isaac pulled her close, and they sat together in the fading light, holding onto each other and the precious time they had left. Isaac lived for another 3 years, long enough to meet several more great-grandchildren and see the ranch continue to thrive under Tommy and Rose's management. He passed away peacefully in his sleep one autumn night, with Catherine beside him holding his hand. The grief was overwhelming, a physical ache that made it hard to breathe. Catherine had known this day would come, had tried to prepare herself, but nothing could have truly readied her for the reality of living without the man who had been her partner for 46 years. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people from all over the state. Isaac had touched many lives through his kindness, his wisdom, and his unwavering support of the woman he loved. Person after person came to Catherine to tell her what Isaac had meant to them, and through her tears, she found comfort in knowing how beloved he had been. Tommy, now in his 60s himself, stood beside his mother during the service and helped her through the difficult days that followed. Rose stayed at the house for 2 weeks, making sure Catherine ate and slept and was not alone with her grief. "Mama, we are worried about you," Rose said one evening. "I know. I am worried about myself too." Catherine looked at her daughter, seeing the love and concern in her eyes. "But your father made me promise to keep living, really living. So that is what I am going to do, even though right now I cannot imagine how." Slowly, painfully, Catherine began to find her way forward. She threw herself into her correspondence with the women who still wrote to her seeking advice. She spent time with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, finding joy in their energy and innocence. She worked in the rose garden that Isaac had helped her create, feeling close to him among the blooms he had nurtured. One day, nearly a year after Isaac's death, Catherine was sitting on her porch when Clara came to visit. Clara was now 42, a successful journalist with children of her own, but she still made time to check on her grandmother regularly. "How are you doing today, Grandma?" Clara asked, settling into the chair that had been Isaac's favorite. "Better than yesterday. Worse than I hope tomorrow will be." Catherine smiled sadly. "I miss him every moment, but the missing is becoming less sharp, more like a constant ache than a stabbing pain." "That sounds like progress." "I suppose it is. Your grandfather would be frustrated with me for moping this long. He would tell me to get on with living. He would also tell you to give yourself time to grieve. He loved you too much to expect you to just bounce back." Clara paused. "I am writing an article about your life, Grandma, about how you and Grandpa built this ranch against all odds. Would you be willing to talk to me about it?" Catherine considered. "I have told that story so many times over the years. What more is there to say? Plenty. I want to talk about what it means looking back now, from the end of the story. What do you think mattered most? The end of the story." Catherine realized with a start that she was at that point now. The ranch was thriving under the 3rd generation of family management. She had great-grandchildren who would someday be the 4th generation. The story she and Isaac had begun all those years ago when he knocked on her door had reached its conclusion, at least for them. "What mattered most," Catherine said slowly, "was that we found each other. The ranch, the success, the respect we earned, all of that was wonderful. But none of it would have meant anything without the partnership and love that Isaac and I shared. He saw me, truly saw me, when everyone else was looking at limitations. And he chose to stand beside me not because he thought I needed him, but because he wanted to be part of what I was building. That is beautiful, Grandma. It was beautiful. The whole thing, from beginning to end, was beautiful." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes, but they were sweet tears this time. I got to spend almost half a century with the love of my life, building something meaningful. Not everyone gets that. I was lucky beyond measure. Clara spent the afternoon interviewing her grandmother, and the article she eventually published captured the essence of Catherine and Isaac's story in a way that touched readers across the country. Catherine received letters from all over, people telling her how the story had inspired them or reminded them of their own loves. On what would have been her and Isaac's 50th wedding anniversary, Catherine gathered her entire family at the ranch for a celebration. It was bittersweet without Isaac there, but Catherine knew he would have wanted them to mark the occasion. 50 years ago, she said to the assembled crowd of children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, I married the best man I have ever known. He made me a promise that day to stand beside me, and he kept that promise every single day for 46 years. The life we built together is all around you. It is in this land, in this family, in the values we tried to pass on. Isaac is gone, but everything we created together lives on. She raised her glass. To Isaac Porter, the cowboy who said he would stand beside me and then did exactly that. I love you, and I will carry you in my heart until we meet again. The toast was echoed by everyone present, and for a moment Catherine felt Isaac's presence so strongly it was as if he were standing right beside her. She knew it was probably just wishful thinking, grief playing tricks on her mind, but it comforted her nonetheless. Catherine lived for 5 more years, dying peacefully at the age of 91. In those final years, she found contentment in watching her family flourish, and in knowing that the ranch she and Isaac had fought so hard to save was secure for generations to come. She spent her days surrounded by love, tending her roses, writing letters, and sharing stories with anyone who wanted to hear them. On her last day, she was in her bed at home with her children and grandchildren gathered around her. The doctor had said it would not be much longer, and Catherine was ready. She had lived a full, rich life, and she was tired. Thank you, she whispered to her family, for everything, for loving me and carrying on what your father and grandfather and I built. You have made us so proud. Tommy held one of her hands and Rose held the other. We love you, Mama. I love you too. Take care of each other. Take care of the ranch. And remember that the most important thing is not the land or the cattle or any of it. The most important thing is the love you share and the way you treat each other. As the light faded from Catherine's eyes, her last thought was of Isaac. She could almost see him waiting for her, that crooked smile on his face and his hand extended toward her. After years apart, they would be together again. The funeral was even larger than Isaac's had been. Catherine Kimball Porter had become a legend in her own lifetime, the woman who had defied expectations and built an empire. But to her family, she was simply Grandma Catherine, the woman who had loved fiercely and taught them all what it meant to be strong. They buried her next to Isaac in the family plot on the ranch, underneath the big cottonwood tree where they had often sat together. The headstone was simple: Catherine Kimball Porter, 1860–1951. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, she proved them all wrong. The ranch continued to thrive for generations after. The story of Catherine and Isaac became family legend, passed down to each new generation as a reminder of where they came from and what was possible with courage and love. Clara's article about them was republished many times over the years, inspiring countless people facing their own seemingly impossible challenges. The house that Catherine and Isaac had built still stood, carefully maintained by their descendants. The porch where they had spent so many evenings together became a favorite spot for young couples in the family, who would sit there dreaming about their own futures. The rose garden bloomed every summer, a living testament to the love that had created it. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun painted the Nebraska bluffs in shades of gold, people swore they could see two figures sitting on that porch, hand in hand, watching the land they had loved so well. It was probably just shadows and wishful thinking. But then again, maybe some loves are so powerful they leave an imprint on the world, a reminder that even the most impossible dreams can come true when you find someone willing to stand